Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, Lord. Jesus told his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out at dawn to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with them for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. Going out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle on the marketplace, and he said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard, and I will give you what is just." So they went off. And he went out again around noon, and around 3 o'clock, and did likewise. Going out about 5 o'clock, he found others standing around and said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They answered, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard." When it was evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Summon the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and ending with the first." Those who had started about 5 o'clock came, each received the usual daily wage. So when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also got the usual wage. And on receiving it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last ones worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who bore the day's burden and the heat." He said to one of them in reply, "My friend, I am not cheating you. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what is yours and go. What if I wish to give this last one the same as you? Or am I not free to do as I wish with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous?" Thus the last will be first, and the first will be last. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today we continue reading through the book of Judges, and yesterday we read about Gideon, who basically is the central character in the book of Judges. The book of Judges recounts the life of about 10 different judges, and Gideon is one of them right in the middle. And today we read a few chapters later about what happened to the descendants of Gideon. So basically the story we heard today is about Abimelech, who is one of Gideon's many sons. Gideon had over 70 sons, apparently, which shows the sinfulness that he fell into later in his life. Gideon was indeed a weak and sinful man, and towards the end of his life, he started worshiping pagan deities, right? Just like many of the other people in Israel. And so Abimelech, one of his sons, decides that he wants to be king over the people of Israel. And part of the reason why he wanted to do this is because Abimelech, he was actually the son of Gideon's concubine. And so he did not have the full inheritance that his brothers did. And so Abimelech, he devised a plan to assassinate all 70 of his brothers on a stone in Shechem. And that is indeed what happened, except for one of the brothers escaped. His name was Jotham. And so basically where we enter the story today is right after Abimelech has slaughtered his 70 brothers with the help of his henchmen. And Jotham hears about it, and he goes to the top of a nearby mountain and basically shames the people of Israel for what they have done. And he tells a parable about trees and brambles wishing to make themselves kings. And it's kind of an interesting metaphor. He talks about the fig tree and the other trees that have borne fruit, and they don't want to be king. But then he goes to the buckthorn, which is basically a worthless bramble, right? And that buckthorn asks to become king. It's an image of Abimelech, the one who has not borne any fruit and yet wants to reign as king anyway. So there's just kind of an interesting metaphor here. But obviously, if you're hearing about this story, you're probably wondering, what in the world does this mean? And why in the world is this in the Bible? I think there is something significant for us in that Gideon, his descendants, very quickly fall into great violence and corruption. And it all started with Gideon's abandonment of God's commandments and the turning over to pagan gods. And this is something that is obvious all throughout history. When human beings turn away from God and seek other gods, it ends in violence and in chaos. It still baffles me that in our modern culture, one of the things you'll often hear people say is, "Oh, religion is the cause of so much violence and wars in the history of the world." It's actually the opposite of true. Christianity is the great bringer of peace in the history of the world. Why is it that all throughout the Middle Ages, for example, there were no world wars? It's because Christianity was keeping the violence at bay. And when there were wars, they were very isolated wars. And how can anybody possibly look at the 20th century, by far the bloodiest century on record, and not see what obviously changed in the world over the last 200 years? There was no more drastic change than the fact that Western civilization abandoned its Christian roots and started establishing a secular culture. And it ended in violence, in chaos, and in bloodshed. This is the lesson from the book of Judges, that when we abandon God, the demons really do start to take over. When God is not head of the house, violence and bloodshed reigns. And this is what is evident all throughout the rest of the book of Judges.